Good evening, everyone. We are live tonight. Here for thank you for everyone attending tonight's live stream. Special one, kind of like an end of the year almost live stream. Hope everyone had a Merry Christmas. Still celebrating Hanukkah. I know that started on Christmas Day, so people are still celebrating Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa and so forth. So hope everyone had a good holiday. Lot going on here as we end the year. So for this video here, see if I got anyone in the chat tonight. Of course, big thing tomorrow, I'm going to go see Nosferatu. Don't know if anyone's seen that yet, but based on kind of what I'm hearing, I'm like trying to avoid any spoilers or whatnot, but hearing good things so far about it. In fact, great things. So we'll see how good that is. And let's see, who do we have in the chat, I wonder, tonight? Good evening. And just reminder, next month, January 11th, we'll start our season 2 of Horror Hangouts. I'll have a panel together once again, and we'll be having kind of an open discussion, kind of like we did on our last one back in November. So that'll be January 11th. And then I have a special guest coming on January 25th. I see Berber Ann's in the chat. How are things in Colorado? Is it snowing there? Is it cold? Here in Texas, it's cool in the mornings, but kind of warms up in the 50s to 60s. So we haven't had any snow or rain or nothing in the last several months. So it's been really dry here. So anyhow, for this video, since last month I did my top 25 favorite movies of the 80s. Dry there too. So not even so you guys didn't even get a white Christmas this year then. I guess I always think of Colorado that it like is I hear there's like always think of Colorado having snow on the ground 10 months out of the year, but I guess that's not really true. But anyhow, so tonight I am going to do my top 25 favorite horror movies of the 70s. And like the 80s, this was a tough one because there were like some movies I thought were going to make the list that didn't end up making the list. So you got some snow leaves up in the mountains. Yeah, I can see that. One thing I found out going back revisiting movies in the 70s, I knew there were what was definitely going to make it, but 70s was a big decade for vampire movies because I probably got maybe 5 or 6 movies on this top 25 that are easily vampire movies, a couple of which are Dracula movies. So that was a big decade. And one thing too, 70s, I think because the 60s started pushing the boundaries as far as like blood and gore, but also sex and nudity. 70s was a horny decade for horror movies for sure. And you'll find that out here shortly. But when you see some of my list here, so let me bring this up here. There we go. So yeah, well, you can see some of them they'll make the cut for sure. A few nobles that didn't make it. The Omen didn't make it, which I'm not a big fan of the Omen. I did like the second one better, but not enough to get in the top 25. And Amityville, the Amityville house there, that didn't quite make it in. I thought that might, but not quite. When I was going through all these movies that I've watched and some I had to revisit, I'm like, it didn't quite get in there, but we'll soon see here. So let's go to number 25. Let me bring this up here. On my list is, of course, a Dracula movie, Dracula from 1979. This is a movie that a lot of people probably have forgotten about, but it's actually a pretty good version of this story. This one has Frank Langella plays Dracula in this. Sir Laurence Olivier plays Van Helsing, and also Donald Pleasance is in it. He plays Dr. Seward in this version. And this version is kind of like, I kind of look at Langella's performance being almost like a hybrid of Christopher Lee's Dracula, but also a little bit of Gary Oldman's Dracula, which would come 13 years later, but it's kind of a almost a cross between that. But yeah, it's a very good Dracula film. It's probably certainly my top 5 or 6 as far as Dracula themed movies go. So yeah, that one's in at number 25. And now we're going to go into, for number 24, we're going to go into the giallo genre, which was big in the 70s. And the title here pretty much says it all, and that being strip nude for your killer. That pretty much says what it's about. Kind of basically, you have a killer in black gloves that are hunting down basically fashion models and killing them one by one. And as in most Giallo movies, it's kind of a who done it thing, and you have to try and figure out who the killer is at the end. But this is a fairly gory movie. It's got, like the title suggests, there is a lot of nudity in this movie. This was directed by Andrea Bronke, I think, if I'm pronouncing this right, and stars Edward Finch, who had starred in, and I probably butchered her name, but she starred in many of these Italian giallo movies. So that's in at number 24. Number 23, and this will be a popular one for a lot of people, and that's The Wicker Man. Of course, this kind of goes along with folk horror. This one, of course, stars Edward Woodward, plays police detective who is who's been sent to investigate basically a missing girl, case of a missing girl. Of course, this also stars Christopher Lee, Britt Eklund, and Ingrid Pitt. This is a very bizarre movie. At times, it's kind of funny in some spots. And just a very horrific ending, and both horrific and weird at the same time, but that's really the tone of the whole movie. um, you could certainly see where this may have been somewhat influential to Ari Aster's Midsummer, though I think they're different movies, but just kind of like in a same type of tone, I guess, or subgenre. But yeah, I have the Wicker Man at 23, and emphasize this is the one from the 70s, not the one with Nicolas Cage. And no, there's no big basket of bees in this Wicker Man for those who have not seen it yet. So moving on to 22, we have a French film known as the Shiver of the Vampires. Now, this is a French vampire film. It's basically about this newlywed couple who go to visit this castle because the bride, her cousins live there. She finds out that her cousins have died, but actually they're not dead. They've just become vampires. And this definitely falls in line with, I guess you could say, erotic vampire horror. This is a weird movie too because it starts off kind of like playing it straight, but as the movie goes on, it gets goofier, goofier, and goofier. The ending gets really weird. So there's a lot of camp value in this movie, but it's an enjoyable movie either way. Um, yeah, this is one you can check out. You can find this on Tubi. It's in subtitles, so if you don't mind that, because like I said, it's in French. But yeah, this movie I discovered actually earlier this year. So yeah, it's definitely very heavy uh, on the sexuality on this movie, but it's also kind of corny too at the same time. And it's takes place in modern time, which for at the time would be like 1970 something or whenever the movie came out. But then it at the same time you still have this gothic vampire feel. So yeah, so we've got Shiver of the Vampires in at number 22. Number 21, we have Deep Red. This is another Italian giallo movie. This one directed by Dario Argento. Um, this basically, once again, another type of murder mystery where this musician witnesses a murder, and between him and this journalist are trying to figure out who done it. The ending goes batshit crazy. I really love the last 10, 15 minutes. It gets really gory. Um, and one of those like, oh fuck type of things, like what the fuck. Um, but yeah, the ending gets really gory. It might get slow in some parts, but it definitely ramps up the last 15, 20 minutes of this movie. So that's number 21, Deep Red. And now we'll go on to number 20. And this is one that some people I think forget that came out in the 70s, but that's the original Phantasm, which came out in 1979. Of course, this stars Angus Grimm, who of course plays the tall man, has been known to and played him in all the sequels that followed. But basically, about this kid who discovers that this guy running this funeral parlor is stealing the dead bodies who've been recently buried and basically turning them into slaves, more or less. And of course, he's known for having this fear that will just fly around and just drill you in the head, literally, as you can probably see in one of the pictures up there on the top left-hand corner. I actually want to. It's better. Okay, do that. So yeah, Phantasm. I think it's a really good film. It's got this kind of like supernatural element to it, and also has some slasher elements to it as well. Um, and Angus Grimm does a fantastic job of playing this character, even in the sequels that weren't as good. Um, he still kind of brings it for the most part. I think most people consider the second one as being the best, and it probably is, but that one didn't come out till like I think 6 or 7 years later after this. So actually I think it came out in '86 or '87. But yeah, Phantasm is the first entry of that series. Really good movie, and definitely highly would suggest watching that if you haven't already. Any Phantasm fans there in the chat? Has anyone seen it? Oh, wow. Okay. Maybe not. But yeah, check that one out. Number 19, another vampire film. We have Countess Dracula. This one stars Ingrid Pitt. This is a Hammer film. Ingrid Pitt, she's going to show up a few times, I think, on this top 25. But basically, she's not ever really called Count Dracula or Dracula. I think they just use that title to make you think that. But she basically plays Countess Bathory, who's this old lady who discovers basically. Okay, so you had seen Phantasm. Good, good. But anyhow, basically, it's about this old lady, aristocrat, who discovers that by bathing in the blood of virgins, she can become younger, and that's basically what it is. And we see the vampire elements play out. This is a really good movie. Ingrid Pitt, I think, one of the more underrated um, queens of horror, shall we say? Doesn't get quite enough love, but she's great in this role, and it's a pretty good if you like that old gothic um, vampire style movie. This one's for you. Yeah, definitely check that one out. Countess Dracula. And a lot of these movies I'm going through, most of them you can find on Tubi if you haven't seen them. So I'll go on to number 18 on the list, and this is The Brood, directed by David Cronenberg. Came out about 78, 79. And if you like movies with like really creepy killer kids, this one's got it. Basically, this guy, his wife is locked up in an institution. Um, think something's wrong. Well, what is? She's giving birth in the most grotesque way, and you don't find out till the very end of the movie to just all these kids at random. It's almost like a. She almost looks like a. I don't even want to give it away too much, but it's almost like a kangaroo pouch that she's got attached to her womb or something. And these kids are like born with no genitals or anything like that, and they will basically kill through subconscious kill other people that are upsetting her. So they like sense on her. So the more angrier she gets or upset she gets, they go out and kill whoever the person is that's responsible for causing her the grief. So it's typical Cronenberg movie with some really crazy body horror, but and also crazier plot to go with. So yeah, check out Cronenberg's The Brood. So that's at 18. So we'll go to number 17, and this is a favorite of many people, and that's Stephen King's Carrie. I think this was like the first adaptation made of a Stephen King book. And of course, we know what pretty much everyone knows what this is about. This is Carrie, a teenage girl who's going through those changes that all teenagers go through. And as that happens, she starts getting telekinetic powers. And of course, people pick on her and they find out real quick she's not the person you want to mess with because all hell breaks loose in the last 10, 15 minutes of this movie. This is, of course, a classic. It's not my very favorite of Stephen King's adaptations, but certainly up there. And yeah, course, I'm going to have Carry On here on the top 25. Uh, I'm guessing some people might have it higher on their list, but hey, if you can crack the top 25 as stacked of a decade as the 70s, I think that's still pretty good. And the thing is, when I made this list, the top seven, when I get to them, are pretty much set in stone. But it's like 8 through 25 could really be in any order, just given my mood. So that so happens Carrie comes in at 17. So we'll go into 16, and we have another Dracula movie. This is from 1970, The Scars of Dracula, starring Christopher Lee, another Hammer film. I think out of all the Dracula sequels, of course, the original being The Horror of Dracula from 58, this might be my favorite in the Hammer series, or second favorite. Um, it's pretty much straightforward, not trying to reinvent the wheel. Christopher Lee is at his best, playing Dracula in this role. He's brutal. He's unmerciless. He's at his best here, and good cast of characters. It kind of, in a lot of ways, it's just telling kind of like the same story. Some people wander into his castle, and he's going to go for their blood, pure and simple. And of course, he has an assistant this time, kind of like a what you would call a ghoul. Kind of pisses him off a little bit, and he certainly definitely pays for it. So, and you have this young couple, and they're trying to get away, but and the villagers are all scared to shiz. The only thing is you kind of wish Peter Cushing was back as Van Helsing, but he doesn't come back to some of the later sequels, and even then he's playing a ancestor of Van Helsing. But still, this is a really good Dracula film. So Scars of Dracula in at 16. And at 15, and this one that I think a lot of people would have higher on the list too, but that would be at number 15, The Exorcist. And of course, this movie that in a lot of ways is probably where you could say that the start of modern horror started in the first place back in 73. 'Cause this is the movie that really kind of broke a lot of rules and pushed a lot of envelopes, so to speak. This, of course, was based on William Peter Blatty's novel, and of course, directed by William Friedkin. Stars, of course, Linda Blair as she plays Regan, and of course, Max von Sydow. He kind of, I think, steals the show as the priest in this. Um, it is a really good movie. It's not a movie I watch a whole lot. It's probably why I don't have it higher on my list. It's one of those things I have to be in the right mood to watch. Kind of like Hereditary. I have to be in the right mood to watch it. but still a really good movie. I'm normally not much into religious horror when it comes down to it, so maybe that's why it's not higher on my list. But I have to recognize it is a great movie and certainly deserves to be mentioned. So, and it's a very important part of the whole horror genre as a whole. So maybe the sequel's not so good. I hear a lot of people say Exorcist 3 is really good. I haven't seen that one. I've only seen this one and never had a desire to see any of the other sequels. I know most people say Exorcist 2 is awful. And I know a lot of people say the newest one that came out a little over a year ago was pretty bad as well. But anyhow, it doesn't replace the fact that the first one is a classic and they probably should have never turned it into a franchise to begin with. Would have been better just to leave it a one and done. Anyone out in the chat a big fan of Exorcist? I don't know. Have you seen it, Berberan? We got four people watching right now. You go ahead, reminded to go ahead. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe and give this video a like and share. That'll kind of help me a little bit gain some more subscribers. We're at 110 right now, which is okay. So do you even like the second Exorcist movie as well, Heretic? I know like one other person that really loves Exorcist too, and they're the only one. So maybe there's now two of you out there that actually loves Exorcist too. Anyway, what's a top 25 if we don't have a Vincent Price movie in here? At number 14, we have the abominable Mr. Hybs or Dr. Hybs, starring Vincent Price. This one, he plays a scientist who's basically going to avenge the death of his wife. And he blames nine doctors for this, and he has an elaborate plan to get his revenge. Of course, there's a really horrifying reveal at the very end of this movie. Once again, it's Vincent Price chewing the scenery, and he's always been really good at. I mean, he's one of the great classic horror actors that we've had. Probably definitely belongs on the Mount Rushmore alongside Christopher Lee. So yeah, this one doesn't get talked. I don't know if it. This is one of his movies that doesn't get talked enough about, but it's certainly an enjoyable watch and certainly has some humor to it as well. So yeah, seen the second one, but they're all worth watching. Okay, maybe I'll watch one of them. I have a feeling I don't know if I'm gonna like the last one or not, but I would at least give three a shot. Maybe I'll give the second one a shot just for the hell of it. Referring to the Exorcist movies. So at number 13, this is one that a lot of people have probably forgotten about, or maybe they shouldn't. That's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is actually a remake of a movie from the 1950s. This is really good as far as the whole kind of blends into the sci-fi horror genre. Of course, has the infamous scene with Donald Sutherland, who stars in it. At the very end, we find out that he's, of course, become a pod person. At the very end, this also co-stars Leonard Nimoy from Star Trek, and also a very young Jeff Goldblum, probably one of his earlier roles as well. But yeah, this is a really fun movie. Not overly gory, a little bit. I think this movie was rated PG when it came out. I think it would probably get a PG-13 rating now if it came out. Just because they didn't have the PG-13 rating back then when this came out. But I'm pretty sure, yeah, I think it was just a PG film, but it still has some really good practical effects in it. Got a good story, good acting, and a lot of suspense in it. So yeah, Invasion of the Body Snatchers in at 13. We're now getting down to our dirty dozen here. And when I say dirty, I mean dirty. We have another vampire flick, Vampirus from 1974. This stars basically two vampire lesbians, Marion Morris and Anilka, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce her last name because I can't. This is directed by Jose Ramon Larraz. This was a British horror film, but not a Hammer film. And basically, these two vampires, they like to basically kind of like bring men home to their house to feed on them, essentially. Um, this movie's got, like I said, kind of like similar to Shiver of Vampires, lots of sex and nudity in it, but also lots of blood, especially the last 10 or 15 minutes does get really, really brutal, where they just go on a rampage, killing anyone that's in their way. But yeah, this is a really fun movie to watch. Not quite as goofy, perhaps, or campy as Shivers of the Vampire. Um, Played a little bit more straight, but it's got a good atmosphere. They have this big, huge old house, which is like a perfect setting for this movie. Um, yeah, so yeah, vampires. This one's I've seen probably in the last couple years, so a few times. So it's definitely has risen up the ranks and it's become one of my favorites, especially as far as the erotic vampire genre goes, and probably one of the movies that probably I guess you could say influenced my writing in with Tales of Castle Vasile. Probably had a little bit to do with that. Which, by the way, that book now is also now my shameless plug of the night is now available on um, Barnes and Noble's website as well. Not in the bookstores themselves, but you can order it on Barnes and Noble. It's actually available for pre-sale for January 5th. So besides Amazon, it's now going to be available on Barnes and Noble's website as well. I don't think I've seen any of the software. Well, knowing you, I think you'd like it, Berberan. That one is also on Tubi. Of course, Tubi's a must. I think you know that. But yeah, check that one out. I think you'll like it. I think it even shows some man ass in that too. So, well, I've got at least two movies for you you can watch. So already, and there's a third one coming up. So at number 11, speaking of vampires, once again, we have Salem's Lot. And normally, this was actually a TV miniseries. Normally, I wouldn't include miniseries in these type of things, but it's so damn good. I think, out of all the Stephen King adaptations that went to like a TV miniseries format, I think it's the best one. And that even includes it. Um, of course, your typical thing. You have a vampire, uh, Kurt Barlow, who's basically hot in this New England town, and people have to try and stop him. And it's a really good story. It's been years. I remember reading the book a long time ago. That's when I kind of need to. Yeah, I'm sure, Burban, you'd love. I'm sure you lure a lot of men and probably women to their death. Um, because a few women get killed in this as well. Referring back to Vampirus, but yeah, Salem's Lot, one of the best ones there as far as vampire movies. I've not seen this newest remake yet. Um, I'll probably give it a shot some point. Maybe next year. Maybe next month. I'll try and give the new Salem's Lot, especially on the heels of getting ready to see Nosferatu tomorrow. But yeah, and this is a highly regarded. I think this is a very much a big fan favorite amongst both Stephen King fans and horror fans. And of course, it was directed by Toby Hooper, who might have who has another movie that might be appearing here soon as we approach the top 10. I can't imagine which movie that could be that Toby Hooper directed, but so let's get on to number 10. and this is kind of a fitting one that we talk about, and that is Black Christmas, 1974. Um, First and foremost, as some of you might know, and I was going to mention this either at the beginning or the end, but I figured I'd wait till I talk about Black Christmas. Of course, one of the stars, Olivia Hussey, who played the final girl, Jess. For those of you who don't know, passed away yesterday. I think she was battling cancer. Wasn't very old. She was, well, 73, which really in today's age, that's not that old. Um, so yeah, we've lost another horror legend this year. It was just a few months ago. We lost Tony Todd, and now we've lost her. But good way to give her a mini salute. But yeah, Black Christmas. Not a lot of people will find this slow. I know a lot of people like the 2006 remake better, and I can understand why. But I still kind of prefer this one just a little bit. It's just a different type of movie. It's very much a 70's movie, directed by Bob Clark, who also directed another Christmas movie called A Christmas Story. So went from um, disturbing slasher Christmas horror to a Christmas family movie. And in between that, he also directed Porky's. So, yeah, there was a guy who did it all. This, of course, also stars Margot Kidder before she played Lois Lane in the early Superman movies. And also John Saxon, who once again plays a cop. We see him, would see him 10 years later in Nightmare on Elm Street. So yeah, Black Christmas. I'm sure a lot of people have watched that in the past month, and as I do every time around Christmas time. So here's to Olivia Hussey, underrated actress, and certainly provided a really good final girl. So we go on to number 8. Oh, get my notes at number 9, Horror Express, and this one came out in the early 70's. This, of course, stars both Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Basically, you have Christopher Lee plays a some sort of scientist who discovers a frozen body, probably from, he believes, a Neanderthal of some sort, and he's gonna crate it up and take it back to Europe on train. And as we find out, that creature they found isn't necessarily of the earth, as it can transport itself from victim to victim. In a lot of ways, it kind of feels a little bit like The Thing, only on a train. It's one of the rare times where Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing play are actually working together in these movies. Normally, they're adversaries, so it's one of the few times they're actually working together. I think Peter Cushing plays kind of like a detective on board. So yeah, this is a favorite, and we don't get enough like horror movies that are set on trains anymore, other than Terror Train. I'm sure I might be forgetting a few, but it's like the right type of atmosphere because it's real closed in, real claustrophobic, but yet, depending on how big the train is, there's enough room to kind of move from car to car. But this movie also features Telly Savalas in probably one of his earlier roles, I imagine. So yeah, Horror Express, definitely check that one out. Also, like the setting is set in like the early 1900s, so they're going from, I think, China all the way into Europe. So, and I like historical settings for sure. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So go on to number 8, and this is another David Cronenberg movie. And one of his, I don't know if it's his very first, but it's certainly one of his earliest, and that's the movie Shivers. This also features Barbara Steele, who we know from a lot of the Italian movies from the 60's. She appears in this more of a supporting role, but she's in it nonetheless. And this basically about, I talked about this decade, the 70's, how horror could get kind of horny a little bit. Now, this is the whole gist of this is you have a parasite that jumps from body to body. Once the parasite takes over, it basically makes the host basically horny, and the way they transmit the parasite is through sex, basically, and of course a lot of horrific side effects that goes along with it. So yeah, this is actually probably, as far as horror movies goes, it's my favorite Cronenberg movie. Um, my actual favorite movie that he did was History of Violence, which really isn't horror, but for all the body horror movies that David Cronenberg has done, this is probably my favorite. And it's one of his earliest ones as well. So yeah, Shivers definitely one you should check out if you haven't seen it yet. Which brings us to number 7, and here's another good erotic vampire movie, Vampire Lovers. This is also produced by Hammer Films, also starring Ingrid Pitt, co-stars Peter Cushing. He is in it for about the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes of the movie. Um, but this is really part one of what's known as the Karnstein trilogy, which was a trilogy of films that came out: Vampire Lovers, The Lust for the Vampire, and Twins of Evil. Of the three, this is the only one that made the list. So the other two are good, but this one I think is the best. And once again, she basically plays this like takes place in the old German countryside, and um, this character Marcella Karnstein, she basically just preying on anyone who gets on the way. Just do what vampires do: seduce, suck, and kill, or make them into one of their brides. And that's pretty much her view. That's her goal anyway. And there's some good killings in this one too. Some few good beheadings at the beginning and the end. And once again, it falls into that erotic vampire that movies that were pretty popular, obviously, in the 70s. I'd have to think some of these movies would probably, what if they inspired Anne Rice and some of her writings as well. Kind of wish we'd get back to that, but anyhow. So yeah, 7, Vampire Lovers. And then now we go to number 6, and this is another Italian giallo movie, and that is The Bay of Blood, directed by Mario Bava. And I kind of like look at this movie. This movie came out in 72, I believe. And I kind of like look at this movie as the prototype of the slasher genre, because you'll watch this movie and you can see how this movie probably heavily influenced both Friday the 13th and Friday the 13th Part 2, because some of the kills are very similar that you see in this. It establishes certain tropes, like if you have sex, you die, kids partying in the woods, which is only a subplot of this movie. There's a much bigger thing going on, and there isn't just one killer. There's a lot of different people killing different people, mainly so they can like own this lake. Essentially, it's basically a land grab movie, and a lot of people get caught in between all this, and the kills are extremely bloody in this one. This is one of the gorier movies you'll see. So, and like I said, you'll see some kills and say, "Oh, now I know where Friday the 13th got that idea from." So, yeah, if you like the earlier Friday the 13th movies, I think you'll really like Bay of Blood. I mean, there isn't necessarily a mass killer or anything, but as far as the tone of the movie and the way it's just presented and filmed, it'll make you think of some of the earlier Friday movies. So yeah, Bay of Blood, definitely a favorite of mine, and this one's always going to be pretty solid on my list. So now we'll go to number 5 on the list. And we mentioned Toby Hooper earlier. Well, here he is again with his masterpiece from 1974, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Not much more to say that hasn't already been said. It was a few months ago. I think back in August, we did a Texas Chainsaw franchise discussion on this one with my friends Alistair and Stella. Um, yeah, I mean, this is just one gritty, disturbing movie from start to finish. It's not as bloody as you think it is, but that's kind of like the genius of how this movie is made. Makes you think you just watched the goriest bloodbath you ever saw, and really there isn't that much blood, but course, gives birth to really the one of the first of our modern horror icons in Leatherface. So even before Michael and Jason, there was Leatherface was really kind of the first one. Of course, they didn't make another sequel, didn't come out until about 12 years later with Texas Chainsaw 2. And then since then, they've had several sequels and remakes and reboots. But this one's always going to be my favorite, with probably the 2000, was it 2002 remake, I think, would be my second favorite. But yeah, definitely have to go with Texas Chainsaw is definitely fifth on my list, and some people might have that even higher. And then next on number four, and this is a movie that's raised up really quick for me, and that is Dario Argento's Suspiria. Maybe one of the best movies dealing with witchcraft that there is. Uh, I remember it took me a couple of watches before I really start to love this movie, and the more I watch it, the more I love this movie. I think what does it is just the way this shot with all the different color lighting in it. I've heard that John Carpenter was very much inspired by the way Argento used lighting in this movie, and he used a little bit of those techniques in Halloween. And certainly, what makes this great too is the musical score by Goblin. Another thing I think I read someplace where Carpenter was really loved that score and kind of influenced him a little bit to write a really good, effective score for Halloween. Um, yeah, but this is like such a bizarre movie. You get this really graphic kill in it at the beginning of the movie, and of course, there's a lot of suspense that leads up to that. Then it does slow down a little bit, and I can see I haven't seen the remake yet, but a lot of people seem to like. There are a few people that like the remake almost as good, if not better, but I haven't seen that yet. And then the end, as typical Italian horror movies do, goes batshit crazy. Oh yeah, I was gonna say the kills. Once you start getting that, you have that opening kill, and then as you get past the middle, the kills start coming, and they come up with some really good kills. I swear, I wish I was like Italian sometimes, because those probably three main filmmakers, Argento, Bava, and Fulci, just came up with some of the most grotesque yet beautiful kills at the same time, if that makes any sense. Just the way they do it, they just have their own type of style, and this is next to Black Sunday, probably my favorite Italian horror film of all time. Okay. Am I missing anything by not watching the remake, Berber Ann? Or is it at least worth a watch? I think I know one person that actually I've know a few people that like the remake, and I know at least one person that actually prefers the remake. And I'd be willing to bet that person's probably under the age of 30, but not to like be an ageist or anything. But yeah, I got Suspiria on number four for sure. And now we're going to get to number three on my list. And that is, of course, Ridley Scott's Alien. Probably. Yeah. Maybe if I have absolutely no other movies to watch, maybe I will give that one a shot. Well, we're talking Alien. Not much that hasn't been said already. This, of course, launched Sigourney Weaver's career. Ripley is probably my mind top two, maybe three best final girls ever in horror movies. A great, terrific cast: Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, Ian Holm, Yaphet Kotto, Harry Dean Stanton, and Veronica Cartwright, who was also, I forgot to mention, was also in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and of course would go on to do the voice of Bart Simpson. So talk about a career going from being killed by a xenomorph to being Bart Simpson's voice. Okay. But of course, the most iconic part of this scene was, of course, the legendary chest burster scene, um, which is funny because about 7 years later, in Mel Brooks, or 8 years later, Spaceballs by Mel Brooks. They parodied this scene, and the same actor, John Hurt, comes back to play that scene as a goof, which I thought was kind of funny. But this movie is like really suspenseful. In a lot of ways, it's like Halloween only in space, kind of. It's just kind of like it just kind of moves at a very deliberate pace, but you get to know the characters a little bit, and then they start getting taken out one by one. Great ending. Definitely my favorite in that franchise, which I'm kind of iffy on the rest of the movies. But this one's definitely one of the best movies ever made. So, yeah, Alien in at number three. And then, of course, I've talked about this movie already a few times along with the director, but that, of course, is Halloween. Got my shirt on, even decided to wear that, but um, we talked about 3 hour, 2.5 hours on this whole franchise a couple months ago, back in October. Um, it's one of the best. I don't consider it the first slasher film. Like I said, I kind of think Bay of Blood and Texas Chainsaw Massacre both kind of, and Black Christmas kind of precede it, but maybe it kind of set the bar or re-raised the bar for what those movies can do. For the longest time until Pulp Fiction came on, it was the highest grossing independent film ever made at that point, as far as how much money it made. Of course, gave us the iconic Michael Myers. It launched Jamie Lee Curtis's career. Of course, stars Donald Pleasance, who's like the backbone of that series, is Dr. Loomis. Um, and of course, there's that haunting score, and it's one of Carpenter's great movies, even though he's made plenty of great movies. And I always get the sense, though, I think he's tired of talking about the movie. So if I ever were to like get a chance just to have 5 minutes to talk with him, I'm making a point not to mention Halloween because I think he's tired of talking about the movie. But plus, Halloween being my favorite season or favorite holiday and all, it's goes right with it. It's like watching Halloween on Halloween is like watching a Christmas Story on Christmas almost, or for some people, Die Hard. But anyhow, that's another discussion. Okay, so now we're going to number one. And just when you thought it was safe to go in the water, here comes Jaws. This definitely, once again, a movie that not much more to say. I just love this movie. I think everyone does, for the most part. Every once in a while, I find someone who doesn't like Jaws, but um, great characters, great suspense, a great build up. I think the fact that the mechanical shark didn't work most of the time end up adding to the movie in a way, because it's like the less you see of the shark, it's almost better not to see it until you get towards the end of the movie. Well, yeah, you're right. Holiday and season. I think you know what I meant. My favorite holiday, but certainly my favorite season as well too. So all part of the whole fall season. Can we agree? I think fall has the best holidays. Halloween and Thanksgiving. Those are like my two favorite holidays. Some people say summer, but I don't know. Summers are getting too hot. I can't stand them anymore. But what's one little fun story about Jaws is there's some people, and I'm curious to hear what those of you in the chat say. Do you consider Jaws to actually be a horror movie? And I asked that because about, I don't know, a couple years ago, I was on Facebook. I know I shouldn't be on there, but and this guy is like asking people in his post, what are your 5 favorite horror movies? Well, Jaws made that list. And this guy is like nitpicking and goes, well, I really didn't like this movie, nitpicking the movies I picked. Well, this movie is okay. This movie is good. I don't like this movie. And then when it comes to Jaws, he goes, Jaws isn't really a horror movie. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, according to IMDb, it's a suspense thriller, so it's not horror. I'm like, so this guy's, of course, like most people on Facebook, being a dick. So I look up the actual definition of horror and I paste it right there in the comments section. Well, look at all the characteristics of a horror movie. I think Jaws checks all the boxes there. And then the guy comes back at me and says, well, I think you're taking this conversation too serious. I'm like, You're the one that's like come jumping down my throat saying, tell me Jaws isn't a horror movie. Suspense thriller about the same damn thing. That's like saying, I don't know. Anyhow, that was like a little story there, how some people get really pretentious about these things. Either way, Jaws has got a lot of suspense, a lot of blood, and it's funny because that movie was rated PG and has probably more blood in it than some of the R-rated movies I just discussed, like Halloween or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yet that one gets a PG rating, and those movies get R ratings. Go figure. But anyhow, so yeah, Jaws, and I think best scene there is best dialogue in there is like Quint's little speech he gives about being on the U.S. Indianapolis, which I guess the actor Robert Shaw recited that whole thing drunker than a skunk, because I guess old English actors back then were known for boozing it up while they were doing a movie, and he was no exception. But how in the hell he didn't win a best supporting actor is beyond me. But anyhow, that's my list altogether. Well, let me go back and we'll just do a quick rundown of all those. Ah, so yes, number one was Jaws. Number two, Halloween. Number three, Alien. Number four, Suspiria. Number five, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Number six, A Bay of Blood. Number seven, we have The Vampire Lovers. Number eight, Shivers. Number nine, Horror Express. You know, I'll get to that question there in a second. Horror Express at number nine. Black Christmas at 10. Salem's Lot at number 11. Vampirus at 12. 13, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. 14, we have The Brood. At 15, no, wait. No, that's right. 15, we've got The Exorcist. Now I'm going the other way. 15, The Exorcist. 16, Scars of Dracula. 17, Carrie. 18, 18, we have The Brood. 19, we have Countess Dracula. At number 20, Phantasm. At 21, we have, I can't even read my own writing. Oh, Deep Red. At number 22, Shiver of the Vampires. At 23, Wicker Man. 24, Strip Nude for Your Killer. And at 25, Dracula from 1979. And yes, The Hills Have Eyes just barely missed that. I think that one, it that gets an honorable mention because that would have been 26 on my list probably. But yeah, that was one that was like fighting to decide which one I was going to put in there. But yeah, Hills Have Eyes, and I don't get too much into. I know a lot of people might have movies like Last House on the Left or Spit on Your Grave, but um, typically movies with those type of scenes and that start with the letter R, I don't really like watching. I'm not saying, grant they do have a purpose to them, but and I get that. And I don't necessarily hate those movies; they're just never my favorites. But yeah, that's my uh well, you see, that's why I'm glad you're watching, um, because that way, and that's how I learned about movies is watching other YouTubers. Like, oh, I've never heard of that movie. I'll have to give that a watch. So yeah, so you have some homework to do. So uh, if you watch any of those movies that you haven't seen, let me know what you thought of them after watching those. I'm going to take this out there. What's some other movies that we talked about? Hills Have Eyes. What are some other movies that people would probably put on there that I didn't have on there? I'm sure there's quite a few you could put in there. I'd mentioned The Omen, which I didn't quite get in there, or even Damien Omen 2. I think that came out in 79. That's one that almost made it. Amityville Horror was another one that could have made it. That's the fun thing about horror. That's why I have a hard time keeping up with newer horror movies because I still have tons of movies from the 60s, 70s, 80s that I haven't seen. So it's like, well, do I want to watch some brand new movie that may or may not like, or do I want to watch some movie directed by Argento that I know I'm going to love? Yeah, I'm the same way with them. I mean, I like the fact that there's at least a payback or a payoff at the end where the people committing those crimes are getting what's coming to them. It's why I hated that movie Eden Lake, if you've seen that, a 2000s movie, because these little brats get away with it, and that kind of pissed me off. Yeah, but this is fun homework. It's not like I'm going to grade you on it. You get a pass no matter, as long as you watch it, you automatically pass. It's like going to gym class. It's just participation. The Car. What's that one about? I have to look that up. Now I'm adding to my list now. I think I've heard of that, but I don't know much about that one. Yeah, yeah, there is some overlap, especially from 70's into early 80's. I think by the time you get to the middle 80's, you can kind of maybe tell a difference, but because certainly like the first, once again, like the first couple Friday the 13th movies certainly look like they could have been made in the 70's. Enjoying my nice beer on this Saturday evening. But they're also the 70's, 80's are also both great decades too. But it would also be easy to like get like say the 2000 and the 2010s confused because they all pretty much feel like those. Seems like the whole 2000s just kind of run together. It's not much different from the way movies are made in the early 2000s to now, really. The way they're shot, the way they're made. They don't have that same aesthetic. The 90's had their own thing going on. I'm not gonna grade you on it. I'm not a teacher. Not yet, anyway. I wouldn't. Hey, if anyone needs I'd be up for a teaching job, but depending on if it's like who I'm teaching. Yeah, yeah, I like that filming style too. That's what kind of the reason why I kind of like some of the movies that Rob Zombie did back in the 2000s because he kind of brought that style filmmaking back. Dawn of the Dead, yeah, yeah. I'm not the biggest zombie fan. I mean, I like zombie movies, but they're never. uh, There's only a few of them that I consider great. Yeah, Dawn of the Dead. That's a big popular one with a lot of people. I even watched a movie recently, Zombie, which is a Italian one directed by Fulci, and it's okay. I just didn't. It wasn't good enough to make the list, though. I think my favorite zombie movie might be Return of the Living Dead from '85, which did make my '80s list. And if I do a '50s, '60s list, I'm sure Night of the Living Dead will make it. Yeah, that's a good one there. I'll have to check out the car though. But anyhow, but like I said, in a couple weeks, January 11th, we'll be starting episode 1 of season 2 of Horror Hangouts. No, I'm not always trying to skip the 90's. I'm just doing I did a couple of these just for filler until I start bringing people back when the holidays were over, just to keep the channel kind of going, let people know I'm still alive. But yeah, I can get to the 90's. I decided I can find 25 movies from the 90's that I like. I may combine it with the first decade of the 2000s, though. 'Cause that's what I would do with the 50s and 60s and 30s and 40s. With the 70s, 80s, there's just so many movies. You almost have to do those decades one at a time. I think with probably my favorite horror movie of the 90s would be John Carpenter's Vampires, followed closely by Candyman. Those would probably be my top two from the 90s. Probably also Sleepy Hollow, Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. That would be up there. There'd be a lot of corny movies from Full Moon from Stuart Gordon, I'm sure, like Subspecies or Lurking Fear. But anyhow, like I said, in a couple weeks we'll be back with a hopefully a full cast of people joining me on camera on Saturday, January 11th. I had to start this one a little earlier because family stuff, but one of the reasons why I didn't really want to commit to doing anything during the holidays, but just so happens I'm free, so I'll just yap for an hour or so and see if anyone wants to watch. But anyhow, thanks for everyone from watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We're going to call this a night. Hope everyone has a fantastic New Year's, and we will see you next year. Goodbye, everyone.